Hey guys, it's time for another Retrotone Guitars podcast, and my name is Josh, your friendly neighborhood guitar guy.
And I'm Bill, the guy who backs up your friendly neighborhood guitar guy.
That we hadn't came up with a good nickname for yet. Hey, we want to do a thing. I want y'all to post on social media what Bill's nickname should be. I call him Billiam, Bill I Am, Big Bill. Let's see, what was another one I come up with? Wild Bill, Kill Bill. But we need a good themed nickname for Bill instead of the guy that just backs up your friendly neighborhood guitar guy. So y'all let us know and give us a shout out on that today or online when we
see the sad thing or the funny thing is I went by Fire Marshal Bill for so many years because I was on the fire department.
Yeah, that's right.
And it just doesn't fit in here, you know.
Yeah, Guitar Bill, Guitar Bill,
Get Bill
all night long. No, that don't fit either.
Yeah, and it could be like remember the Ray Stevens Guitars and.
That's what. That's what Spencer. Every time I go into Lavender Mountain Hardware, shout out to Lavender Mountain Hardware. They can take care of all your hardware needs here in the local Armurchie area. Spencer, that ad didn't cost you nothing, brother. But that's what Spencer, the owner, calls me. He calls me Get Tarzan every time I walk in the door. So that's kind of funny that you said that.
Well, it's funny. I was in there yesterday. They actually had some keys made here for the shop, and they work great.
Cool deal. Yeah, and tell them, you work at Retrotone Guitars, and it won't get you a discount or anything, but, at least they'll know who you are instead of some random stranger. Hey, we got a theme. We try to go with just what, the theme of the day is or what ideas we can pop in our head to doing this podcast, because me and Bill are known to be chatterboxes when we want to be, and we love guitars and talking about guitars and things like that. But we come up with this idea the other day, and the title of this podcast is The Greatest Guitarist You Never Knew.
I love it. I was amazed.
Don't give away who it is yet.
Yeah, I was amazed because I actually went to your house. We went over there to get some equipment here for the store, and I saw an album on the wall that was one of my guitar heroes, and I'm like, you know who this is? And I was amazed that someone else knew about him.
Yeah, he played on a lot of different records, a lot of things. He was part of the Nashville A-Team back in the 50s and the early 60s. He played on all the tracks that we all, if you're my age, I'm 41. If you're my age or older, some of the younger generation may not have heard the songs, but if you listen to old school rock and roll, old school country. But anyways, yeah, this guy played on a lot of songs he was part of the Nashville A-Team, and he played on a lot of songs that you may have not even realized he played on. But after you start listening for a while, you'll start to recognize some of the licks. Well, today we're going to introduce Walter Lewis Garland, professionally known as Hank Garland. He played in, he transcended genres, Bill. That's what kind of amazed me. He started out, he was born in South Carolina in the 30s, and he started out, playing in country bands, but he transcended from country to rock and roll, and then later on in life to jazz. And there's not a lot of guitarists that can do that can play those all three styles and just seamlessly do what he did. But he is probably one of the lesser known guitarists in the industry.
He is, and what amazes me is you're talking about transcending genres, but he did it successfully, and it was good. Some of the names that you may or may not recognize, he was on Patsy Cline. He played with Roy Orbison. He played with Elvis, Bobby Helms. You name it, and he's on it.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's kind of take this all in. A little bit of back history on Hank Garland. He was born in Cowpens, South Carolina. Yeah, there's actually a town called Cowpens, like a pen that you keep your cow in.
Would you believe I've actually driven through Cowpens, South Carolina?
I may have come close, but I don't think I've ever been in a cow pen in South Carolina.
Well, and among some of my earlier careers, I was an over-the-road trucker, and so there's not too many back roads that I hadn't gone through over there.
There you go. Well, he started playing guitar at the age of 6 and began on local radio shows when he was 12. Now, it's a lot different. It was a lot different back then than it is now. Back in the day, you would have each of your local radio shows. They didn't have like music or like a playlist like the local radio stations. Well, all radio stations are kind of commercialized now, and they play, just hits or records from whatever. But back then there was live music on the radio stations that broadcasted at a certain time, just like live TV, And so he was already playing on those radio shows at 12 years old. That's how good he was that young, that he was able to perform for a live audience. Heck, I've been playing for 3 years, and could I play for a live audience? Yeah, but it probably wouldn't be that impressive.
Wouldn't be as impressive as him. And something else about the radio that I didn't understand until recently. I was watching the Ken Burns documentary on country music, and they were talking about these AM stations that broadcast.
I've been wanting to watch that, but like Amazon wants like a small fortune for it, and I'm like, I'm not going to pay for that.
My dad received it as a Christmas gift, so I watched it.
Oh man!
But the
I'll
amazing
have to borrow
thing,
that sometime.
I will. The amazing thing that surprised me, I'm like, how did people play in Nashville on an AM station and get heard in Kansas City? But back then, there weren't near as many broadcasts garbling up the frequencies.
Yeah, FM hadn't really come into play yet. I don't even know if it was discovered. And AM modulation, AM stands for amplitude modulation for all you electronics geeks out there, and FM stands for frequency modulation. But all the AM stations, that was the one popular, and they had just about every town. I mean, if it was a town of any size, they had AM stations. They had all these stations, and local talent would come into the radio station, bring their whole band in the studio, and would play on these stations. And then if they were good and the locale liked them, well, then they would cut a record at a local recording studio, or maybe even at the or at the radio station.
Yeah.
Then they would spread out regionally, and then if they were good enough, they would go nationally. But then they would make it like the Louisiana Hayride was kind of like the farm league in baseball terminology to the Grand Ole Opry, and you knew that you made it to the big time when you made it to the Grand Ole Opry. Well, Hank Garland played at the Grand Ole Opry at the ripe old age of 16. Can you believe that? He had already made it from 12, where he was playing on local radio shows. Just 4 short years later, he made it to the Grand Ole Opry at 16.
That's amazing.
That's crazy. He was just that good.
Cool. So I'm still blown away with him, and I don't want to move ahead too fast, but I want to go ahead and talk about what we all know about, because it's really, he had an accident later in life where I learned about him, and we'll get to that in a minute.
You're like fast forward and slow down.
I'm getting excited. It's one of the things one of the few guys I like.
Slow down, about. Marty McFly. We hadn't gotten the DeLorean yet. Continuing on, after he played in the Opry, he kind of got in trouble a little bit. They told him, they're like, well, we're unionized musicians, and you're not, due to child labor laws, you're not old enough to work. So come back in a couple of years, and we'll put you to work as a working musician. You can join the musicians union. So he had to go back home kind of with his tail between his legs, and it was kind of disappointing for him. But he went back home to Cowpens, and then sure enough, a year later, he came back and started recording. And then at the ripe old age of 18, there's a little backstory to this. He was playing a warm-up, and country music legend Red Foley. I know a lot of y'all had never heard of Red Foley, but country music legend Red Foley heard his warm-up. He said, man, he said, what is that? What are you playing? He's like, oh, it's just my warm-up. He's like, well, we need to make a song to that. And so at the ripe old age of 18, they came up with the Sugarfoot Rag, which was a million hit seller, and that was in 1949.
He became known for that song. That was almost his theme, if you will.
Yep. He was so famous for that song, they called him Hank Sugarfoot
Rag.
Garland because of the Sugarfoot Rag. And right here we have a clip of the Sugarfoot Rag, and we're going to play it for you right now.
Okay.
All right, so after that, he came on and went on the Jubilee program. He played with greats such as Grady Martin and Eddie Arnold, but Hank Garland's probably best known for his work with none other than the king of rock and roll,
Elvis Presley.
And he was Elvis's, after Scotty Moore left Elvis's band in 1957, Hank picked it up in 58 from 61, which he produced. He played on such hits as I Need Your Love Tonight, A Big Hunk of Love, I'm Coming Home, I Got Stung, A Fool Such as I, which is a good one, and Little Sister.
As we were doing a little bit of research for this, I came across a little nugget of trivia.
Mm-hmm.
Elvis actually gave Hank the ukulele he played in Blue Hawaii.
Yep,
and it had EP on it for Elvis Presley, and gave that to him as a gift for playing along and helping him out there.
And I talked to Hank's sister-in-law and brother via Facebook, and so shout out to Miss Amy and Mr. Billy Garland. We're trying to keep Hank's memory alive. I know I've talked to you several times, and she actually confirmed that they've still got the ukulele that Elvis gave them from Blue Hawaii.
Really? That's very cool.
As well as the majority of Hank's guitars in their collection. Now, they were for sale on Reverb a while back, but those instruments really belong not in a collection, but really in a
with
museum.
The family.
Well, in a museum.
I will say, they need to be preserved. They don't need to be sold to just anybody that might do something what we consider unsavory to those guitars.
Yeah. I mentioned Little Sister earlier about him playing on Little Sister. Now, if you've gone through the Country Music Hall of Fame and RCA Studio B up in Nashville, which this is where all these hits were recorded, they were either recorded at RCA Studio B or the Owen Bradley, the Bradley recording. I can't remember the exact terminology. But Elvis would come in. They would normally record with him on a Sunday evening. So Elvis would come in at he was always late from what the story has been told. You're supposed to start recording at 6 in the evening. Elvis would get there probably about 8. And then first thing he'd want to do, he'd get there, he'd be like, hey, let's all go downtown and let's go eat some crystals. And the musicians would kind of get upset with him, but they'd stay recording into the wee hours of the night in the early morning. And on Little Sister, they kept playing it and they kept doing cuts and they couldn't seem to get it right. And Hank suggested, he's like, he come up with Hank was famous for putting in his little riffs that just added to the song. And if you've ever heard Little Sister, it goes, Little Sister, don't you? And just that one little lick that he did on guitar, that's what made that song. They come up with that thing about 2 o'clock in the morning, cut it, and it was over with. The song they've been having trouble with all night.
You know, the funny thing, I was just reading some of the things. There were a lot of studio musicians that did get aggravated with Elvis because of some of the habits you were just talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
But I just read a quote where Elvis said that Hank never got aggravated with him, always professional, always courteous, and Elvis loved recording with him because of that. It didn't matter what happened. He was the consummate professional.
Yeah, Hank, you know, I never met him or anything. He passed away in 2004. But he was, in his early days, you know, he was kind of a hothead. There's a movie about Hank. So if you ever want to research anything about Hank Garland, the movie is called Crazy, and right now is on Amazon Prime, and you can watch it for free. It kind of gives his professional career in that. But they said Hank was kind of, you know, he was redheaded, and he was a hothead, you know, a lot of times. But him and Elvis, they really hit it off. They got along really well.
Yeah, that's what surprised me, because if you watch the movie, which was produced by Steve Vai, so I was taking it to be pretty true.
Steve Vai actually played Hank Williams Sr. in that movie.
Oh, really?
Which Hank Garland also toured and played with.
He did. But that movie depicts a scene where he's recording with Roy Orbison.
Yes.
And you see Hank get aggravated and kind of.
And that was at the Bradley Studios. That was not at Studio B. He was getting mad at I can't remember the guy's name, but
one of the producers. And
the language in there, you have to watch the language because it was kind of bad. But they used the actor that played Hank Garland was the guy that played Jerry Lee Lewis in the Johnny Cash movie Walk the Line.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
Same guy.
Yeah. It just surprised me that the movie depicted him as a hothead, but in some of my research, other people saying different things. So, you know, history.
Well, you know, Hank didn't remember a whole lot. You know, his memory left him and stuff kind of after the accident. But you would ask him about Patsy Cline, and he really didn't remember her a whole lot. But you ask him about Elvis Presley, and Hank's words was, he sure was a nice guy.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing, you mentioned Patsy Cline. You know, Hank recorded on Crazy, and when Hank got married, Patsy Cline actually sang at Hank's wedding.
Yep. If you can pull up on YouTube, it's called Walking After Midnight. Now, even though Hank never recorded on the original, you can see him and Floyd Kramer playing on the video on YouTube. Well, we're running a little short of time. We're not going to cut it off. We're going to continue for a few more minutes. We got about 5 or 6 minutes left, and so we're going to kind of move along fast. Another couple of Hank's songs that you may not have known that he played on was Pretty Woman. The guitar lick in Pretty Woman, that's Hank Garland playing. Brenda Lee, Rocking Around the Christmas Tree. Jingle Bell Rock, Hank Garland co-wrote, never got credit for it, never got any kind of funds. But if you listen to Rocking Around the Christmas Tree and Jingle Bell Rock, those guitar licks that are played every single Christmas, that's Hank Garland.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many more. Bobby Helms with Jingle Bell Rock and a couple other songs.
The Everly Brothers. I mean, Bye Bye Love.
Marty Robbins, when you go back into the old country. I love the old Marty Robbins.
Yeah. Boots Randolph, Conway Twitty, Roy Orbison,
Skeeter Davis,
Little Jimmy Dickens. I mean, this guy's all over the place, man. And we just want to try to put the word out there to do do your due diligence. Research these guys that made music history, especially the guys on the back lines that never got recognized.
Well, and there's one other artist I'm going to recognize just because my parents would, if they listened to this, they would kill me. He also played with, I know you said Boots Randolph, but Floyd Kramer as well.
Yeah, those were all part of the Nashville A-Team.
Yeah.
And, Hank and Billy Bird, which was the lead guitarist for Ernest Tubb, from Walking the Floor Over You fame in the early 40s. Him and Billy got together with Gibson and designed a guitar named for both of them. It's called the Birdland. Billy Bird and Hank Garland, and they called it the Birdland.
It is.
But not only was Hank a guitar virtuoso, he was also a pioneer in developing new sounds and prototypical guitars that that he helped with. So yeah, I mean, not only was he a guitar virtuoso, he helped Gibson, and for a short time he is also sponsored by Gretsch, and he used Gretsch guitars.
Yeah, and just to let you know, everybody in the world of guitarists has played Birdlands, know about the Birdland. We have, some of the guys like, it surprised me that Eric Clapton and even Ted Nugent have played Birdlands.
Oh, Ted Nugent, we've got a good customer in the store that comes in, and Ted Nugent still buys Birdlands. He has over 24 of the pointed Birdlands and still plays them and still collects them.
Yeah.
But as with all good things, this story and unfortunately our podcast has almost got to come to an end. In late 1961, and if you watch the movie Crazy, it'll tell you more about this, but Hank had a really bad car crash in his Chevrolet. I think it was a Chevrolet wagon.
It was, if I'm not mistaken, a 57 wagon.
Yeah, and it left him in a coma. Well, he regained consciousness and recovered, but it kind of left him mentally slow, and it really banged him up and beat him up, and he just couldn't get back to the studios, and he wasn't the same man that he once was.
Well, the thing was, and this is how I learned about Hank. I didn't know about Hank until I had an injury, but he actually received nerve damage in both arms. He had broken arms and nerve damage where his fingers wouldn't work as well.
Yeah. And
that was the frustrating thing to him, because things that came easily and effortless before, he had to really work for.
Yeah.
And
all joking aside, I'm sure he was still better than I am right now, even with all his issues and everything.
He could probably dance on top of us and
just wipe the floor on me. Yep. But unfortunately, he never made it back to the studio. He had a really good relationship with Johnny Cash. Johnny wanted him to record for him in the 70s, and he just wasn't the same guitarist that he was.
Yeah.
And
it's my understanding
they couldn't use any of the recordings.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's my understanding they did record, but those recordings were never released.
Yeah. So now Mr. Hank, he stayed alive, like we said before, until December of 2004, where he died from complications of a staph infection. But he still stayed pretty active in the guitar industry. I've seen Miss Amy post pictures of where he would keep in touch with his old friends, and they really helped him. He lived with Amy and Billy in the latter parts of his life, and they kept him up and they took care of him, and they kept him active in the guitar community to try to help rehabilitate him and just keep his memory and everything alive. And that's what we're trying to do here today. Hank Sugarfoot Garland. This podcast is for you. This is dedicated to Miss Amy Garland, Mr. Billy Garland, trying to keep the legend alive for Hank Sugarfoot Garland.
It is, and it's just one of those things. I don't think I can say anything more or better than what you just said, so I'll let it be at that.
Yeah, do your research and look at the discography of Hank Garland. And look at the guitars that he played. He played a Gibson ES 345 later on after the Birdland. And, I mean, just a wonderful, wonderful musician, full of talent, just killer player. Look up, it's called the song Move, and it's on his album. It's the one I've got actually hanging on my wall. I can't remember the title of it right now. But some of the fastest guitar playing, you think some of these heavy metal shredders and guys are fast, man, they can't even hold a candle to Mr. Hank Garland. But that's all the time we have right now on the Retrotone Guitars weekly broadcast. We'd like for you to tune in to us next week, and we'll talk more guitars, more history, and just whatever actually we can kind of come up with. So this is Josh, your friendly neighborhood guitar guy.
And this is Bill, hopefully to be the former guy who backs up your friendly neighborhood guitar guy.
Former but still here, but with a new nickname.
Yeah.
And signing off. See
Cool.
you next week.
Have fun.
Peace.